normally I think everybody would start saying that they have been being an artist since they were 3 years old or something like this. And I always find this tremendously funny because all kids are drawing and painting and crafting, etc. I think the real difference starts when you go to school. In this, and it depends on whether you have somebody who helps you to bring you on this creative path and to pushes you a little bit also to stay there, especially during your adolescence and these kind of things. Well, my parents weren't very much interested in art, and because I've grown up in East Germany, art teachers were more interested, or they couldn't care less about whether we would draw and paint. They were interested that we could explain why in art history shows clearly that the socialist idea was much better than anything else. So I think I was something like 16, 17 with a group of other friends where we started to develop our own creativity. One became a poet, working with books and these kind of things, a publisher. Another one was a writer and also became a theater director. And I was the creative, the visual guy. So I was starting to draw, etc. But I think it took me until I was around 20 when I saw a presentation by art from Max Ernst. And this was the revelation for me. So suddenly I had something what really interested me, a kind of an art form which was interesting. Well, I've been drawing, painting before, but without a clear education, this was very difficult. And what interested me in Max Ernst, because this was the presentation all about, was art beyond painting. And suddenly I had something to work with it. So I started to work in photographs, prints, all kind of collages and all these kind of things, which didn't require, if you so want, a kind of elaborated education as an artist. Maybe I should, for those who are not familiar with it, saying, I mean, theoretically, it would have been possible to study art also in East Germany, but first of all, it was extremely difficult because places were very, very limited. But at the same time, it was clear kind of a political kind of study. So you were trained to become a painter who would do something in the honor of the ruling class and ruling party. And coming from Max Ernst and Surrealism, I mean, I had everything in mind except this. So I started studying chemistry instead. But I mean, it had also a little bit to do that I started so late, because when you're pushed much earlier, you would say, okay, I'm trying this until I get in it, and I do anyway what I want. But because I came so late, I had this kind of ambivalence all the time. So I started chemistry instead, which has helped me a lot to understand the materiality of art, if you so want. And I was very much driven to printmaking, yeah, which was quite difficult in East Germany, but still I would do lino cuts, all kind of this not too sophisticated printmaking, as I said, photographs and this kind of things. And then the wall came down, East Germany collapsed, and we decided that we would move to Belgium. So I have been living for around 30 years in Belgium, and there I had done my own studio. I had a printing press. I was very much learning printmaking, etching, silk screens, and all these kind of things. And I was working quite a lot on printmaking and artist books. And well, one of the problems with printmaking, at least I would say in the 90s, but also before already, is that art on paper was not at all fashionable. Yeah? So it was quite difficult to make a print and to sell it. You could sell it via books, but of course, if you do it in a book, you can't sell it as expensive as you would sell it as an original. All these kind of questions. So we were moving around and we're doing art book fairs and this kind of things. After a while, I said, well, I mean, why shall I make original prints if nobody's really interested? So what I was doing collages instead. So I had an original and I could then produce copies of it and in art books, collages, which were very much in the surrealist kind of thinking of Max Ernst, Les Femmes Sont Têtes, these kind of style where I was working on. And this has gone on for quite a while until 2014. And in 2014, this was a bad year, if you so want, because a friend of mine committed suicide when he turned 60. Another one died in his early 50s on a stroke. Around this time, maybe a little bit later, a year later, so the gallerist I was working with in Germany died as well, and I couldn't anymore. I stopped making art for roughly 4 or 5 years. I was continuing to do some travel books and this kind of things where I would put collages in, draw, etc., but nothing in the sense of making bigger art and etc. And it had to also to do a little bit with frustration about what I saw in the art market, where the art was heading to. And in around 2018, 2019, and I suddenly saw some of the art of the late 19th century, and I said, well, there's beauty in this kind of art, and if it would be still possible to paint beauty in the way as it was seen at that time, also the art during the 2 world wars, which in Germany is called Neue Sachlichkeit, new objectivity. There was a lot of figurative art going on, and this has attracted me a lot. Yeah, and so what I did is I started painting, and this is what I'm currently doing. And more or less people coming back and saying, yeah, I mean, we see this kind of surrealist trends in your art. So I have been pushing it a bit. It was very much in the background for quite a while. Now it's coming back, etc. So this is where I stand now. Last thing maybe, then of course COVID came, changed a lot, and this whole change practically from not making art into making art again, being in lockdown in Belgium, having had a trip to Berlin, seeing how Berlin was behaving under lockdown, we decided we have enough. We have been living nearly 30 years in Belgium. We want to do something else with the rest of our lives. So in April we moved to Berlin, and since then I'm living and working in Berlin now. Well, I mean, I had, because I was so much doing collages, and I say, I mean, there's quite a number of things which was going on. I mean, the trigger where that I had these problems, this personal kind of issues. But at the same time, I have been doing collages for quite a while, and this is something I could do nearly blind. I close my eyes and could make collages. So, what's next? Yeah, and I didn't really know what to do next, and so this has, and as I said, also this kind of disappointment with the art market, where I had the feeling a lot of bad art is coming into, or maybe bad art is not the right word. There's a mocking about the visitor, the viewer, the collector, etc. And this wasn't the art I wanted to do. And so this is why I slowed down practically 2.0 until I suddenly saw well, it wasn't all abstract, informal, and all this kind of conceptual, etc. There was, at least between the world wars, an enormous amount of figurative art in Europe, but also in the United States, nearly everywhere, Italy, Germany, in the UK, and nobody talks about it. And the more I've been researching into it, the more I digged up. I found a lot of amazing people, and this is practically what triggered to start again painting. And of course, it's hard, especially painting figures is most probably the hardest thing to do. Yeah, but it's enormously satisfying at the same time. The ones, of course, which I have put in the exhibition. Well, first of all, were the first things I did end of 2019, early 2020, into 2020 under the lockdown. And I think what I clearly see is I'm coming from this kind of surrealist collage making and brought it into the painting. Yeah, so there, what you see there is the surrealist landscape, which is so prominent with Max Ernst, with Salvador Dali, this emptiness. So it's the figure, but it's a figure quite often in an empty space. So this brings it in. One of the pieces I have in the collection is a clear homage to Max Ernst on the La Belle Jardinière. My piece is called La Belle Machiniste. And it was really made as a kind of homage, because I did remember that when I practically started out my creative career, it was based on paintings by Max Ernst. So I owned him something, and I made this painting there. Yeah, but the art I have in the exhibition is, I think it's fairly much influenced, and I would say I am very much influenced on this surrealist of the first generation. It's of course from my point of view very hard to explain and to discuss. In preparation of our talk, I have been looking up a couple of quotations, etc. And there are some of the Belgian surrealists which are lesser known, and one of them, for instance, said that surrealism is a kind of a, well, way of life. Yeah, so I mean, either you have it, either you live it, or you don't. You can't simply paint in a surrealist style without feeling it to a certain extent. And I think this is what the old surrealists around Andre Breton were trying to convocate. That there is a kind of a feeling. Yeah? And one of the feeling is this kind of very empty space, the world as a theater, the world as an empty space, far into the distance, and we, the ones who are in the picture, are the actors who are operating there, maybe as a kind of improvisation, maybe under a spell which tells us what we have to do, but we don't know why we do it. That's an interesting question. I mean, if I'm looking into my development, I would certainly say, well, I haven't been to art school. I have been doing residences and this kind of things, so I have been short-term things where I learned printmaking, etc. I would say go to art school, but give a shit about what the people tell you and try to teach you there. The important thing is that you need people who are like-minded, not the teachers, the other students. And I think this is something I have missed, because it gives you a network, because it helps you to exchange and to get a kind of a criticism which is at your peer level. Yeah? I think this is something I have always missed. I have been fairly isolated in the way I've been doing. The other thing, if I'm looking today, and this is quite hard, to have a good online presentation. Yeah, is far easier said. I mean, I'm always surprised. I would think everybody has a website, everybody has a Instagram feed and all this kind of thing. And I still see people who are far younger than me who don't do health, certainly not a well-developed website, etc. But of course, because there is so much going on online, it makes it even harder to stand out. Well, and the other thing, I mean, this is what I've been doing all my life, takes the opportunity when it comes.